Hey, Stephanie, we are so excited to have you here today. I was just preparing, before the call to learn a little bit more. And holy smokes, as we were just talking about, I feel like you've had multiple lives, and each one of them is so incredibly impressive. On top of all of that, you're an author of The Power of Practice Management. You are a columnist for financial planning, investment news. You've been on Kids's, Advisor Perspectives, Financial Advisor Magazine. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. And then what I love too is that you have this time in your bio where you retired. You took a retired in quotes, took a step
Yeah,
back, and
retired
then
airplanes, yeah.
yes, came back and
Yeah.
are just full at it. And so maybe we just start there. I mean, you've built this incredible experience that you've had working in with advisors and such over the years. And
Yeah.
what kind of prompted you to take a step back and then get back into it? So,
Um, well, it was interesting. It was not my plan to unretire. Michael Kitces, who's one of my clients, jokes that this is my encore career. I
mhm,
call it my passion project, because that's really what it is for me. So I started my first firm, my consulting firm, when I was 24. So I'd worked in an estate planning wealth management practice that worked in the high net worth, and in particular the ultra high net worth space, which is an amazing way to cut your teeth.
mm,
And ultimately, really got good at helping kind of build and run and grow that business. And I got invited to speak at some conferences, had the opportunity to get in, right, speaking on the financial services side specifically. So started my firm, sold it 12 years later to a Fortune 200 company. I always joke that I learned so much about how Fortune 200 companies run that I no longer needed to work for one.
mm,
And then literally took a year off, went to the beach in Turks and Caicos with our two very young children at the time, did a lot of scuba diving. And then Joe Duran, who was the CEO at United Capital at the time, which has now been acquired by Goldman Sachs for anyone who's not familiar, literally called me up out of the blue and said, I have the perfect job for you. And I was like, how could you know that? And he was like, because I created it just for you. And I was like, okay, fine. I have to hear you out. And that's where I basically took over practice development, training, and client experience, right? The advice model, built out that network and that franchise across our network, right? So really institutionalized and scaling the best practices from business all the way to behavior, which was that in my time at Genworth, where we really integrated this practice management offering. So this is where I learned to do things at scale.
mhm.
And then really knee deep, as everyone likes to joke, in the apex of my career, retired to the beach in Costa Rica,
Yes.
because in spite of all of that success, I wasn't satisfied. It was like, no matter what I did, what magazine I was on the cover on, what I was named, right? Bloomberg asked me to write a book. Like, that's awesome. Mark was like, hey, Steph should write it. Like, I've done like all these amazing things. And I
Mhm,
kept thinking, if I just got better, if I accomplished more, if only I would fill in the blank, turn that corner,
right.
climb that next rung somehow. It wasn't conscious. I wasn't like sitting down, journaling. It was just that was feeling. And the reason that I unretired is because I figured out what it was about and how to solve for it. And it was radically transformed my life
Mhm,
and the business that, right, the second consulting firm, coaching firm that we have now. And that's it. I'll share the secret, of course, in a second, but it really is the thing. Like, we were always had developed this really I felt so blessed, like, to have a real reputation for results. That was what our brand was always been about.
right.
Now we have this incredible, like, the results are like, how are they getting those results so fast, so impactful, and with so much time and freedom? Like, wow. So for me, the underlying learning there was, for me, success, it turns out, had been a form of significance, right? Money was a way to get meaning. I was striving,
Mm,
right, to figure out what felt good. And I just hadn't reconciled that. Had a really tough childhood, which, right, it's a little bit of a long story, but my mother was diagnosed with a mental illness at 9. My father was PTSD from Vietnam. Insert ensuing childhood trauma, lack of worth, etc. here. And so for me, success was, right, a way to salve that and fill up the cup, if you will. But we all
mhm,
know, like, it lasts for 7 seconds. And so when we retired to the beach in Costa Rica, I had no intention of unretiring. I was like, I am done with that. I don't have to work anymore. This
mhm.
is going to be amazing. And it was for like four amazing years before I unretired. I did, Lauren, what everybody does when they retire,
Mhm.
and they're soul searching. I Googled how to be successful, dot, 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 and happy.
Mm.
because I hadn't figured that out. So it turns out that all of that success was really my striving for that. Like if I could just get better, 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 somehow
Right.
I would be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I Googled that, read an article on mindset, read an article on positive psychology, read an article on neuroscience that led to a paper, which led to a research study, which led to years of really copious hours spent studying the science of success, the psychology, peak performance, neuroscience, quantum physics, epigenetics, like really cool stuff
Yeah.
in the last 10 years that really provides so much more insight and information about how we elevate who we are, how we show up, our work, our wealth, our well-being, as
Mm-hmm.
I like to say. So I'm sitting on the beach in Costa Rica, right? Drop my kids off at school. I'm in my morning reading time. Everything's groovy. And I'm reading a study from Carnegie Institute published back in 1910, and it's called Education and Engineering. And Carnegie was all about like growth and development and learning. He invested a lot, and this particular study was about how to get students in a college, in particular an engineering college, like how could you design the curriculum and the experience to make people learn, change, and grow. So it was really
Right.
a study in how to be successful at, right, learning, changing, and growing. And Carnegie Institute has done a ton of research in that field in the 100 years since. So I'm reading this study and they're sort of summarizing it. And there it is that they really determined that there were three factors to success, right, in terms of like, creating change, sustainable and lasting change in learning. Knowledge, right, the environment, what you know, right, because that does have an influence. Skills, you either have them or you can acquire them. The
Mm-hmm.
third factor was psychology, right, attitude, mindset. And I thought, yeah, it makes sense. I've read that, we've all kind of know about the self-help books, right? Positive affirmations, right? Thoughts,
Right.
all the good stuff. Attitudes, everything. But then the next line really was a mind-blowing experience for me and is ultimately the reason that I unretired. And I remember sitting there and reading of these three factors, the conclusion was that success in this endeavor was greater than 80% responsible, driven by our mindset, our psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought, I barely know what they're talking about.
Yep.
Right. I mean, I'd
Seems so
obviously started
simple,
reading,
right? Like, but tell me more.
but
Yeah.
I was like,
Tell
I
me
mean,
more
we all
about
know this intellectually, like, yeah, of course it matters. We got to be, but then here's some hard science around it. Right. And I'd been just getting deeper and deeper. And well, I love self-help and the woo-woo. Like I was in a place where I was like, I'm not going to unretire because people are going to think that I've like lost my edge and gone soft. Like that is the world from which I came. Right. I wore the
Yeah.
three-piece suit. I was all like on the cover of Financial Planning magazine when we did our research. I was all like looking all like serious, like, oh, I'm so tough and amazing. Like, and now just picture me on the beach, like, yo, what's up? Like, there's no proving going on anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so I read that and I thought, wow, maybe this is that thing I have yet to figure out because I've gotten as good as I can get at that other stuff. It's not the answer. I've
Right.
made the money, I've built the brand, I've built this an amazing team, I've sold it. Like, now what? So
Right.
I always refer to myself as like the princess and the pea, right? Always, like just keep piling on, thinking, it's going to go away. So I
Right.
read this and I just thought, I have got to know. So
Yeah.
that began, right? Basically, it has not stopped right now, 10 years in, right? 8, 9 years since.
Mhm.
I really basically got a self-designated degree. And like I just spent hours and hours and hours every day studying this, reading the research papers, right? And then I had a couple clients who had reached out. So I was applying it in my own life with just incredible results. Like I went from feeling like I was in this stressed out survival state all the time to feeling empowered and inspired and joyful and right, the obligation of work, the imposed, right, perceived. I mean, I worked for 4 years after I sold my company. So it's not like I sold the company and just whisked off, but it was
Mhm.
that perceived obligation. So when I really figured out, based on the Carnegie study and a wealth of like really established neuroscience, Harvard has the Mind Body Institute. There have been massive studies on happiness. And
Mhm.
what it essentially boils down to is our mindset has the greatest impact on our work, our wealth, our well-being, our business, our body, our bank accounts, our relationship to money, everything that we be, have, achieve, and experience begins right in these 6 inches. This is the most important space that we have.
Mhm.
And we spend almost no time reflecting on it. We have right, we do tests on every part of our body when we're sick. Like when was the last time we all really said, hey, let's go inside our headspace and see what's going on in there, what's
Right.
serving me, what's shrinking me, what's, got me stepping back, what's got me leaning forward. And so for me, when I unretired, it was actually a series of weird and odd instances. Bob Veris, who's a good friend of mine, has been a great supporter and mentor over the years, reached out to me randomly. So I'm literally meditating on my deck at the beach every morning, and I'm like, should I do coaching? Should I do consulting? Should I do them together? Should I go back to financial services? Should I do something else entirely? Should I become a third grade teacher? What am I going to do? Because now I have all this time. I've run the PTA for 4 years, and like there's a certain amount of purpose, growth, and expansion we all want to engage in. So I did the decompression and the learning, and what was left was a lot of energy and inspiration around sharing and applying what I had learned, because it had been so transformational for me. So Bob had reached out, and this is public knowledge, and she's talked about it in different podcasts and publicly. She was splitting with her partner back at the time, Kristen Luke, and right, those can just be tough things to go through. So Bob is like, hey, you've been through a lot of big transitions, right? Could you talk to Angie? And so we had a great conversation. Apparently I said something really impactful, like really landed, and she felt great about it, shared on a bunch of podcasts, which was very lovely of her. She didn't need to do that. But Bob called me afterwards, and he was like, what happened with you and Angie? He's like, she was just like really over the top about that call and how helpful it was. And I was like, I'm kind of into this mindset thing. I was like, so I did all that, like the best practices, like I'm the deep business expert, right? I'm on the magazines, I've written the book. I was like, all that consulting stuff's awesome. All those levers that we pull, strategy and operations and service advice and planning and teams and M&A. And like, I signed off on, I built the model at United. I built the client experience. I had to sign off on every deal. Like I knew that side of I was like, but dude, that's not where the shiznit is. It turns out that's like 15 or 20% of our success. Like this other 80%, it's more like 90 to 95%, according to the science, by the way. By the age of 35, we're a preconditioned set of hardwired habits and behaviors, 95% likely to do today what we did yesterday. I call it like those invisible force fields where you're like, I want more and better. And yet, for some reason, I procrastinate, or I don't do it, or I keep making decisions that aren't aligned. And you get frustrated and overwhelmed. And so for me, the decision to unretire, Bob said, you should unretire and talk to people about this. And I was like, nope, no way, Jose. And he said, why not? You feel so strongly. It's obviously so impactful. Again, I was like,
you can see the passion. Yeah.
I was like, I am a business expert. And if I come back, people are going to think that I've gone to Costa Rica and I've gotten soft. I've become one of those woo-woo people. And I was like, I am not one of those woo-woos. There's hard science here, man. And he's like, well, might I offer a different perspective, Miss Mindset, right? Because I'm supposed to have this amazing mindset at this point, right? Like all things are possible. And he said, maybe you would be the best person to do it because you have such a reputation on the business side, right, for delivering and knowing what you're doing. He's like, maybe you're the very best person to come back and be like, hey, I found a better way. And I was like, oh, darn. Okay, maybe. And literally, I'd had a couple of clients that who'd reached out to me that I'd worked with privately before. And they were like, could you just make like an hour a week for us? Like, we would just love to get some guidance around this next phase. So I was like, sure. And my new approach is mindset plus methods. That's what I do. Like, you just got to know that we are going to really start to dig. And it turns out I've always done it. That's why we got results. But now I have like 5 years of deep training and coaching. And now I'm like, oh, we're going to integrate this. So we've the best of consulting and coaching. And I'm telling you, game changer. Absolute. So it's not that you can't be successful or you can't elevate your success. It's the speed, I call it inspired action, right? And the joy and ease with which you do it. Like if you can't build a great business and enjoy the ride and rewards, then I would argue that's not success, right? It's a form of striving. And our job with our economics is to elevate our experience, not shrink it. So that's that's why, because I get so excited that this is my passion project. Like we have other businesses that generate like, double digits in annual revenue. And I don't spend a lot of time there because this is right. When I think about where I want to spend my time and energy with my time on this planet and the impact I want to have, this is the most important conversation I can have.
I mean, I think it's also one of the hardest conversations to answer, right? Which is what wakes you every day, and that you like, there's like a real passion, right? It's not just sort of like a made up kind of thing. So I mean, Bob's right. Like you've brought this incredible rich experience to the table. It sounds like unknowingly just leading also with this idea of mindset, and then have been able to help that blossom when you took a step away. And now that you've been back in it for some time, how do you approach it? Like, what's different about kind of where you were before to where you are now? And what would it be like to work with you? What kind of things are you doing that are different?
It's funny because success really is driven 80% by our mindset. And I'll really break that down. And the way our mindset shows up is we can think of having 3 habit realms.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you've read Atomic Habits, there's a map, right? We are basically, right? We have 11,000 thoughts a day. I'm sorry, we have 11 million, we have 60,000 thoughts a day.
Mm-hmm.
80% of those are negative, and 95% of those, Lauren, are on a constant replay loop. Those voices in your head that are like, you can't, you shouldn't, you don't know how, you can't charge that. You've got to say yes, or you'll get eaten by a hungry tiger and die.
Yes. All those
They're
little,
not your
like you
friends.
said.
They
Yeah.
are shortcuts that your brain created, origin stories from your childhood, where literally I was talking with our group this morning. We were having one of our personal development calls. We do practice calls and personal calls. And we were talking about our relationship to money, right? And how it shows up and it either helps us or hinders us. And she was telling a story, the origin story for her of like, money is scarce and you've got to be a saver.
Mm-hmm.
Was that her mom, when she was in private school, had her walk into the principal's office in 3rd grade and tell them that their tuition payment was going to be late because they didn't have the money. And she was like, I was mortified. She was like, first of all, why was that in private school if we couldn't afford it? Public school would have been just fine.
Right,
Second
right.
of all, I remember feeling so much embarrassment, like, oh my God, something's wrong here. We don't have enough money, and thinking, why am I the one having this conversation? And she just remembers thinking, I never want to be in that situation again.
Yes.
So she becomes, she's done really well, right? That desire to make sure everything's okay and to make a certain amount of money really was part of the motivation to become successful. True for a lot of very successful people.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I call efforted action versus inspired action. So this is the invitation to understand your relationship with your own success and money, or your desire for more of it. Efforted action, as if we took a piece of paper and we drew a line across it, right? Above that line, draw plus, below that, draw minus. Above that line is everything good and awesome that you've ever felt and experienced. This is where your thoughts are positive, your brain's right, your biochemistry is positive, you're in that positive can do, everything is possible, everything is figure outable, your abundance, your creativity, the desire to make the leap, to raise the feed, whatever it is, like that all happens above the line in that positive, empowered, what I call success state.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else, which the science says we spend about 70% of our time on a daily basis in stress state, right? A light version of fight or flight. We're all familiar with this. Yeah. What happens below that line is everything negative and disempowering. I can't, I shouldn't, I don't know how, fear, uncertainty, doubt, anxiety, stress, judgment, blame, the need to prove, overwhelm. All of those feelings happen when we're below the line. The issue is that we don't recognize that we spend way too much time below the line. And it's because we have one brain and 2 minds, right? Those 60,000 thoughts a day, like a fraction of them are conscious. The rest are happening on a giant replay loop in our line saying, you can't make more money. Only, people are bad and people with too much money are bad, or, hey, there's never enough, or, you can't charge clients that. What will they think? I can't delegate to a team member, right? Clients won't like it. Like, these are the stories that really hold us back and shrink us. Mm-hmm. And so as soon as we get into a place where we learn how to spend more of our time above that line in success state, we get clear, we get conscious about what's happening and why, and we can start to shift those patterns of behavior. So instead of responding from a reactive state, good example, ever had a prospect ask you for a discount? Sure, right? Everybody has. How many times have we said yes? More than once for most people. And then later we're like, oh, why did we do that? We did that because in that moment, right, those hardwired, like the subconscious mind and those stories and beliefs, right, are running through our head. And what are those beliefs in this business? All money is good money. All clients are good clients. All assets are good assets. All revenue is good revenue. Yes is the only right answer. Your job is to get people to say yes. If they say no, you'll get eaten by a hungry tiger. You'll die. You'll never get another referral. Like, something bad will happen. Right. So we don't sit there consciously. Like, you set a fee schedule, you decided you were worth it, you marketed to people, they spent an hour with you or an hour and a half with you on the phone in a meeting, getting to know you. And at the end of that time and investment, they said to you, Lauren, we really love what you have to say. There's a lot of value that we see here. There's just one teensy little problem. We think there's just an easy little bit less value than you do. So could we have all that love, attention, and awesome, the experience, the knowledge, pick up the phone with the same enthusiasm as all those other clients who were just not smart enough to ask for a discount? Give me all the best that you've got every time that you're engaged with me, and feel just as good about it as you do with everybody else. Could you do that for about 75% less, please?
Yeah.
What would you say?
You can't grow. That's
You would
not
say,
possible.
if someone walked in and said that to you outright, what would you say, yes or no?
No.
Everyone's like, I would say no. And I'm like,
Yeah.
except that's not what we do. Every time a prospect asks you for a discount and you say yes, you're
Mm-hmm.
essentially saying yes to that. The prospect is saying, I see value, just not what you do. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd like the same as everyone else, but I'd like it at a lower cost. And I'd like, instead of me deciding that there's value or not, I'd like you to decide if you want me bad enough as a client. We're
Yeah.
automatically putting ourselves at a disadvantage in terms of right value and trust equity, right? And kind of right who's sitting in the seat of trusted advisor in that relationship. Are those clients we really want? Are they in the best service of the practice? If we're clear that we have in a lifestyle practice 50 to 150 clients are all you need to have a wildly successful practice, have a great life. You can get bigger than that if you want to.
Right.
But if you only need 100 seats and you fill the bus, the coach reframe here, the mindset shift from below the line, I got to hold on, I got to save, I got to make it okay, to above the line, I only want clients that
Yeah.
are additive, right? So I always say that really great clients, aside from meeting your profile, should be three things: motivated
Mm-hmm.
to do this work. You cannot drag people to the finish line. We all know those people. Able to see the value. Some don't. That's okay. I'm not trying to change anybody. Just
Yep.
want to find the people that do. Third, happy to pay. Motivated, able to see the value, and happy to pay. If they don't fit that criteria, they're not great clients. You don't want them. Some
Mm-hmm.
will, some won't. So what? So who's next? Like, you can always manage your time, energy, and capital to go find a pipeline of great clients if you get clear, get focused, and get to work. You
Mm-hmm.
can't do that most of the time because you're too busy doing too much for too little, for too many people, for too long, because we're constantly making these compromises from a crisis of confidence. I have to take that too small client because I'm afraid the referral source will never send me another one. I have to say yes to that discount.
Mm-hmm.
Every time we do that, we should be writing ourselves checks, Lauren. So the next time, if your minimum is 5,000,
Mm-hmm.
someone comes along with 3,000, they're not quite there, but you haven't figured out how to say no with dignity in a way that you feel good about, which I'll share in a minute if you want me,
Yes.
is if in real life I said to you, Lauren, you're going to write yourself a check for $2,000
Mm-hmm.
every time you take on one of those clients, and you're going to rewrite that check every year, because keeping that client is actually, from a right opportunity cost perspective, you only have 100 seats on your bus. Every seat you fill with someone below the minimum is money that you're taking out of your pocket. It's
Yeah.
just that we can't see that money yet, so we don't treat it the same way. If I put your ideal practice on the table and I said, here's 100 seats, here's $1 million, every time you follow my advice, you get to keep that pile of money at the right at the end of the time frame, the year. But every time you take a client below the minimum, you got to take that money off the table. Every time you check your email more than twice a day, you got to take $5,000 off the table. Every time, right, you do something that's going to compromise your success
Yeah.
out of habit and
Mhm.
conditioning, and you know what would happen in like 3 days? You would stop doing it all, because the correlation between your behavior, your
Mhm.
thoughts, your behavior, and your results would be so crystal clear that your brain would learn really, really quickly.
Mhm.
But we don't write ourselves a check for $500 when we check email 17 times a day. We, on average, spend 3.6 hours doing it. What we give up is money we haven't made yet.
Mhm.
And so that's where we learn. We learn when we reach a pain point or we have a possibility that inspires us.
Mm. I love it. So, oh my goodness, so many things to take in. So, it sounds like if there were going to be someone that would partner with you, is it typically someone that is at a place where they want to grow, but it's like they just keep hitting walls? Is that fair, or what kind of would that profile look like?
Uh, our the clients we do our best work with are financial advisors, founders who want to build a wildly successful business and life they love. They want to accelerate their success, gain back their time and freedom, and build a hyper successful practice that gives them the time and freedom to enjoy it. So that will typically, like when you think about your client avatar, like how do you clearly define that? So
Mhm.
that's who we do our best work with. We have two different ways that we work with advisors. We have a lifestyle coaching program, kicks off in 2023, where it's really about, we call it building $1 million 100-day off practice, which is really just Fridays and 8 weeks, by the way.
Mhm.
We have advisors that are smaller than $1 million. We have advisors that are a bit over $1 million. It's really about building a lifestyle practice that fits your version of success, that allows you to deliver deep value to clients, build a hyper efficient practice, get a great steady pipeline of growing clients,
Right.
and do it while creating time and freedom for yourself. So that program is really about the mindset, the methods, like the personal momentum. We
Yep.
like to call it like a 12-month masterclass in building a kick-ass advisory firm, like mindset and methods.
Yeah.
And then for advisors that are already over $1 million in revenue, we call them leaders, right? There's a more and a better. You do want to grow, you have big goals, transferring to the next generation, right? Building marketing engines that aren't dependent on you. So for those 7 and 8 figure firms and founders, we have a leaders program that's like a mix of consulting, coaching, and an elite mastermind. But irrespective of how we work with firms, it's that mindset and methods approach, which is, are you really clear on what you want to create? We'd like to say when the vision is clear, the decisions are easy, because that
So true.
is the roadmap for change. And
Yes.
in that roadmap for change, you can get really conscious. This is where the mindset piece kicks in. And you can say, am I living, being, having, experiencing, earning everything that I want and more? And what's in the gap? And
Hmm.
then we start to look at, hey, do we have the right client base? Are we charging the right fees? Do we have the right systems in place? Are we leveraging our time? So while mindset is a really big part of the work that we do, we'll probably spend 80% of our time, it's almost switched. Like we'll still spend 80% of our time talking about the levers and the methods and the M&A and the value, like depending on what, what we're
Right.
working on. But that 20% of the time, it's, what do we really need to, like, you're smart, you're capable, you've done great stuff, you do great work for clients. What is holding you back from that next level of growth?
Yep. That's
Oh,
fair.
it's that we aren't using our time wisely. Well, why not? Well, because we're control freaks. Why are we control freaks? Oh, that's a mindset issue. Okay, how do we start to shift that? And what we find is when we surface these conversations, and we're not like laying on the couch crying, we're just having candid conversations about what's happening behind the curtain in our mind. And man, it's like you part the curtain and it's like the runway clears and the resistance leaves, and all of a sudden you get clear, you get focused, you get to work, and you make the changes. That's how we get those results that we're known for, as not just effectively and efficiently, but as enjoyably and quickly as we do, is when you put those pieces together and
Hmm.
you've got a motivator. We call it a big why, right? Something that really is a value to you that you want to achieve or experience.
Hmm.
It's, we call it mojo, like it's magic, the
Yeah.
kind of mojo that you can create when you get really clear, get really conscious, and then create a course of action. And what it really boils down to, we like to say, mindset sits in the space of making sure that the tongue in your mouth and the tongue in your shoes are all moving in the same direction.
Mm.
Because we have a tendency to talk one way and act another. And that's the gap that we all sit in every day.
Hmm. Okay, so we're wrapping up on time here, but if someone were to work with you or to go through this sort of an exercise, what's the number one thing you think would help set them up for success or the relationship up for success? That pre-work, if there's any.
Pre-work. I don't know if there's pre-work, but there are two exercises I can share quickly that will transform anyone's life quickly if they do them. And it's just like obviously there's a lot more that you can do both on the business and the personal side. But the first is that line exercise, right? If you take a piece of paper and you literally draw a line, we're going to use this with time,
Yeah.
right? What's above the line, below the line. Everything above the line is energy creating and revenue producing.
Yep.
I could talk to you for 19 hours, go give a speech, consult with a client. I could just do it and do it and do it. I'm like the Energizer Bunny.
Totally
I love it.
positive.
It elevates me, inspires me, uplifts me, gives me, it is energy creating for me.
Yep.
When it's all over, I'll be like a deflated balloon, like, okay, I remember I've used all, but while I'm in the middle of it, like there's no end to the charge because it's elevating to me. It's energy creating.
Yes.
So there's really only two kinds of activities, energy creating or energy draining. Stasis lasts for like 7 seconds when we wake up, right? Then our brains, right, those stories in our head shift is above or below the line.
Yes.
Everything below the line is the opposite of that. It does not enlighten or inspire you. You procrastinate, you put it off, you avoid it, you hate it, you dredge it. And at the end of the day, it's energy draining and it's not revenue producing. It might be revenue sustaining, but
Right.
again, it's not right in the direction. So our number one job to affect change in our income, our time, and our freedom is literally stop doing below the line activities. Just stop.
Yep.
So I check my email twice a day. It takes me 30 minutes because I have someone that checks it for me. We have all these rules about what goes where, what I look at, what she looks at, what gets processed without me, our system for surfacing any questions or issues. Like we have a system. Yeah, I'm not just like, here you go, trusting you with like, no, like we have boundaries and business systems in place to make sure that we've got a hype, like there's some real levers you still have to pull. But most people get stuck when I just say check email twice a day, they absolutely panic. Like the stories in your head start just chirping off. Email is not an energy creating revenue producing activity. Here's how I know. No one in 25 years, Lauren, has ever called me up and said, I check my email 17 times a day because I just know there's so many awesome prospects and they're dying to get a hold of me. We do it out of habit. We do it for the little dopamine hit, and we do it because we want to feel productive in a sea of overwhelm. And it's a bunch of little wins, but it's utterly dilutive. It's stealing at least 30 or 40% of the average person's productivity. Like, so then I say, oh, stop checking, and everyone panics. Like, how are we going to do that? One, you create an email policy.
Yes.
Right. Happy to share mine if anybody wants to reach out to coaching@limitlessfa.life. Ask for a copy of my email policy. It's like 3 pages long. It details what to do, how to do. If Michael Kitsis, who's one of my clients, emails, it goes here. If like a random person, we like, here's what you like, it lays the whole thing out. So what I say is I just show up and do what I'm told every day.
Yes.
I'm not in charge of anything. But at a business level, I'm clear and conscious. I'm in charge of everything. I set the rules. I'll check email twice a day. Here's the system I want you to follow. So I have total confidence that what's happening is supposed to be happening. We've got a good communication loop. People feel like our love and attention, like, wow, how are they so on? Like, here's how we're going to accomplish that amazing experience, right? Mindset plus method. So here's a great way. Here's the mindset piece, because your natural behavior, remember, 95% hardwired to do the same thing tomorrow, except that I'm going to tell you about the Post-its.
Oh, okay.
You're going to take 2 Post-its. You're going to write a 1 on one and a 2 on the other, and you're going to stick them on your monitor. And when you check email the first time in a day, you take off the first Post-it. And when you check off email the second time in a day, you take off the second Post-it. And after you've removed all the Post-its, guess what you've committed to not do anymore?
No more email.
No more email for that day. So it will literally feel like someone has cut off your hands for a day or two. And then what you'll realize is you're just so much more productive because you didn't spend 3.6 hours. Now, if you don't have someone checking and processing, you might spend a little bit more time. But the key here is don't process and produce at the same time. Processing, if you're doing your own email until you can get someone, do that right away, is that 30 minutes in the morning is and into the day is processing time. So if Lauren's like, hey, got a quick question for you about our podcast, like my assistant will grab it, put it in the today folder. So I've got time to review it in the beginning and the end of the day. Like, okay, great. Hey, Dorian, just a little quick this, or tell Lauren that, or, oh, all's good, no big deal. Like quick hits things, or Dorian will be like, hey, I need something from you. Boom, away it goes. If it requires more than a few minutes, it's not email, it's service work, or it's marketing, or it's advice, which means it gets calendared in your time block. So if you want to read about how to take agency over your time, I wrote a great article. I say great because it's like 5,000 words long, so it's basically a book.
It's rich.
It's great about writing for kids. Everybody's like, go for it, girl. And it basically breaks down from the mindset piece, which is a really reflective, like intentional conversation that will really shift your relationship with time. But then how we go from annual calendars to model schedules to email, like it'll take you all the way down the rabbit hole from big picture to like best practices you can use tomorrow, like the Post-its.
I love
so if you're interested in do that. So when people stop checking their email, you know what's left, Lauren? Time that they have to focus on something. And then that means we get to address the next issue. Am I focused on the right things? Do I actually do my tasks when I'm supposed to? Am I procrastinating and distracted? Okay, well, I don't have email now. It's so we start to just go down the rabbit hole and keep figuring out what we have to solve for. We're not working over problems anymore. We're working through them because we have the clarity and consciousness from mindset to go, okay, what's really happening here? Why is it really happening? I keep talking about how overwhelmed I am, but I took on the clients. I said what I did. I decided what I was going to charge. I make decisions about how wow, the only person really in charge of the situation is me.
Yeah.
So if I'm in charge of it, that was the mindset thing that caused me. I was like, wow, if this is that big a lever and I haven't pulled it, what's possible when I do? And then, I get so excited about it. And then I had to decide to go out and start a business and tell everybody. So that email strategy, so the line exercise is super powerful. One of the things below the line, most of you should be, right, checking email, not responding to awesome emails. That falls in, right, like client retention or something.
Right, right.
When you get clear on what's on this line, your business plan becomes really easy. Everything below the line that is not awesome for you, you draw a line out farther. You draw vertical lines, time horizons, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 5 years, depends on where you are. And everything below your line at some point has to go, depending on the time horizon. Hey, I'm going to give up all the paraplanner work within 6 months. That's going to go above the line. Who sits in that sheet? Oh, it's going to be a paraplanner, in-source, outsource, part-time, full. Like now you're clear and you're conscious. You're conscious about where your time is really going, what's additive and what's dilutive. And you've made a conscious decision to get focused on the things that are energy creating and revenue producing, which is the surest way to make more money in less time, by the way, and be happy and inspired doing it. And now you can build a quick business plan, get focused and get to work. So these things that seem so big and complicated and so overwhelming and unsolvable, when we just start to get really clear about what's happening and why it's happening, from a place of just slightly more consciousness, not being in that survival stress mode, sitting in that success state where we can evaluate from our conscious, right, Einstein brain, not the caveman brain that's always in charge, like don't die, but from the Einstein brain that can sit in that space and say, what do I want to create in my practice? What do I want to create in my life? What's the gap? What do I need to account for? Okay, now I can work on my mindset and methods with a really right a roadmap for change. So I think that's what Limitless is good at. We're really good at giving you a proven track to run on. We know how to build big firms, small firms, right? All sides. Like there's a blueprint for success, and we know all those models. Our most impactful work, aside from all the really cool business stuff, is helping people elevate their thinking and their decisions and their actions rapidly to kind of create the results that they want with greater ease and joy. That's what I get really excited about.
I love it. And you can see that your passion just in how you talk about it too, which is also really inspiring as well. So thank you for sharing and just so many insights about your journey and how you got to where you are today, but then also some really great takeaways and you can literally immediately apply. I'm gonna have to try this email tracker and I'm sure it's gonna kick my butt. So I really appreciate
Well,
your
it's a habit. Like our job is to break those habits and patterns. Like how can we sit in that space? Email is just one example. Hopefully listening to podcasts like this and sharing those actionable insights helps whoever's listening.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure to include links below as well to your book and other resources. And thank you again for your time. We'll be in touch. We'll keep the conversation going.
Yeah, happy to be here. Hope it was helpful. Everyone have a great day.